Hi, you're listening to Dusk to Dawn, reading horror and weird fiction. We're your hosts, Amber and Dan. Read the episode's book first if you don't want any spoilers, because we're full of them.
We also talk about sensitive topics. This is a horror podcast after all, and we swear a lot. Well, Amber does. Find any trigger warnings in our episode notes. We're happy you're joining us, and enjoy the show. Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. We're going into vampires this week. I'm excited. We're talking about Carmilla by Joseph Sheridan Le Fanu, a book which predated Dracula by about 25 years and is going to be an interesting conversation for sure. I'll get right into the author. So Le Fanu was born in Dublin. He was the son of a Church of Ireland clergyman, and he was an Irish writer of Gothic tales and mystery novels. He was the leading ghost story writer of the 19th century and was central to the development of the genre in the Victorian era. M.R. James described him as absolutely in the first rank as a writer of ghost stories. Three of his best-known works are Uncle Silas, Carmilla, and The House by the Churchyard, which apparently heavily influenced Finnegan's Wake by James Joyce. I can't verify that because I've never read that book. Will I? Who knows?
I just saw recently that a book club group in LA finished reading Finnegan's Wake, and I believe it took them 20 years because they read one page a month.
And I bet that was like a good amount of work when they sat down to read that page.
Well, I think they started out reading more than that, and then they cut back because it was too much.
That's crazy. I also imagine that I would read The House of the Churchyard just to prep myself for Finnegan's Wake and then be like, all right, I'm going to get all these references, and then I'd read it and not catch any of them.
Yeah, it'd be so subtle, I'm sure.
That happened to me with William Faulkner, who wrote what was the book? I totally forgot the name of it, but I read about it because one of the characters commits suicide, and I was like, oh, I'm interested how suicide would be portrayed by, like, I don't know, one of the literary masters of American fiction. And I read the book and I was like, what? When did I was expecting there to be a dramatic suicide scene, but it's so stream of consciousness that it was kind of like, when it was mentioned, it was so subtle and so many other things were being discussed that I totally missed it. But it was still a cool book.
That's like the first time I read Ulysses, and I knew going in that one of the reasons it was banned in America was because he masturbates. And the first time I read it, I totally missed that as well. So here's to being confused by literature.
Yeah, here we go. It was The Sound and the Fury, and the character was Quentin Compson. He drowns himself in the Charles River after moving to go to Harvard.
That sucks.
And then I read the book and I was like, wait, when did he commit suicide? And I had to find out where it was. And
Did you reread it? And then was it more obvious?
No, dude, do you know how long it takes to read a Faulkner book?
No. I meant that section. Like, did you find it and then go to read that part again? And was it more obvious the second time?
I think I remember still being kind of confused. It was like, oh, in this sentence, when he mentions the bridge and the water, it's an allusion to the fact that he will commit suicide there or something. I don't know.
Okay.
It was still tricky.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Maybe I was also bad at reading it. Maybe if on a second read, I'd be like, oh, it's obvious. Who knows? Let's continue with Carmilla. So now you know a little bit about the author. He also went to Trinity College in Dublin. So that's pretty cool. Whether or not he ever knew or met Bram Stoker, I don't know. I did a little bit of research about, we'll get to that later, talking about influences. Why don't you kick off the summary of Carmilla?
In an isolated castle deep in the Austrian forest, Laura leads a solitary life with only her ailing father for company, and all the servants that she doesn't want to mention, until one moonlit night, a horse-drawn carriage crashes into view, carrying an unexpected guest, a beautiful Carmilla, the beautiful Carmilla. There's beautiful Carmillas just falling out of the sky in the Victorian era, by the way. Just the one Carmilla is what we see today. Oh boy. So begins a feverish friendship between Laura and her mysterious, entrancing companion. But as Carmilla becomes increasingly strange and volatile.
Volatile.
She just slowly turns purple. It's really awkward. She might be choking and no one seems to care. But as Carmilla becomes increasingly strange and... Now I can't get it out of my head. Volatile. But as... Caramel. Oh my God.
Oh, no.
I'm losing it. But as Carmilla becomes increasingly strange and volatile, prone to eerie nocturnal wanderings, Laura finds herself tormented by nightmares and growing weaker by the day. Predating Dracula by 26 years, Carmilla is the original vampire story steeped in sexual tension and gothic romance.
It's not the original vampire.
It's not the original vampire, yes. But it's the original vampire story steeped in sexual tension. Maybe. Actually, I'm not sure about that either. It's definitely the original gothic romance vampire story.
Lesbian romance vampire story. Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, definitely all those things put together. Yes, this is the original of all those things specifically put together.
This was the first of Carmilla. Okay, so this book, being an old classic, even though I had never read it before, will probably be a little more spoilery since you've had 150 years to read it or something like that.
And it's not that long, so...
Yeah.
But to be fair, I also hadn't read this before, and it had been sitting on my TBR for a very long time. So maybe this will be the oomph you need to read it.
Yeah, it was a fun read. I'm excited to talk about it. So we're going to start off by talking about the book, and we're also going to talk about how it relates to Gothic literature. Amber's going to take us on a nice little tour of Gothic literature during that part. We're going to talk about Dracula and its influences on Dracula and why Dracula is so much more well-known than Carmilla, and just kind of like vampires in general. We just saw Sinners this past weekend, and
so good.
It was awesome.
Oh, so good. Go see it. Go see it right now, and you'll probably want to see it again.
Yeah, it's
in
great.
Theaters. With the wiggly seats. We saw it with the wiggly seats.
The D-box.
Yeah, well, that was cool.
I like wiggly seats. Yeah, and how very different that was than this. Also, the queerness in the book is super interesting because a lot of the conversation around it, I think, is... like modern conversations, but on a book that maybe was not written with any of those ideas in mind. I have no idea. We'll talk more about it. And then also I got this weird version edited by Carmen Maria Machado or Mikado. I'm not sure. And it's like a weird metafiction edit that's interesting, and I want to talk about it.
It has really pretty pictures, and that plus the cover art is why I grabbed this book. I didn't realize it was going to be a different type of editing. Yeah,
I'm interested to get your take on it because it's interesting. So Amber mentioned in her reading, by the way, of the book summary that Laura is living alone with her ailing father, and I do actually have a quote for that. So let's just get to that one right away because it's quite funny.
Yes, it is.
So she's setting up the situation. They live in a place called Styria in Austria, southeast Austria, and they're living in the woods in like the old family manor house, and it's gothic. It's very gothic. It's like it's got all the great tasty vampire tropes where it's like a big estate, but it seems like the family's kind of on the downslide. A lot of the furniture is old. They do make enough money to live there, but
and the beauty of these tropes is that they weren't tropes. So these are all relatively original concepts.
Yeah, which really
become
cool.
Tropes.
Exactly. Which makes it so fun to read. So
give us the quote.
The narrator is Laura. She's the main character. She's the one who ends up befriending Carmilla. And she's giving a description of the setting. And then she's like, the beginning of this quote is really cool, but she starts to talk about how lonely it is. Listen and wonder. I must tell you now how very small is the party who constitute the inhabitants of our castle. I don't include servants or those dependents who occupy rooms in the buildings attached to the manor house. And she goes on and also mentions she has 2 governesses, a nurse, a nursemaid, and a housekeeper. And like the governesses are around in the story fairly often as like figures who move around and converse with her and her father. So it's just great how she's like, it's just me and Dad and, you know, maybe like a dozen other people.
I'm so lonely. I don't talk to the plebs.
Yeah, so that was funny. So it is just her and her dad, at least for her psychologically. And they are expecting a guest, what was his name?
General Spielsdorf.
General Spielsdorf was supposed to come visit the following day, bringing along his niece and ward. But that's not going to happen anymore because they get a letter saying that his niece has died. She was doing all right. She looked like she maybe had a little bit of a fever, but there was no cause for concern. She has suddenly, unexpectedly died. The general sends this letter saying he will not be making it there. He needs to go get to the bottom of whatever has happened. And maybe in, you know, like 3 months, he might come and visit. So we start out with Laura, who has no companions, expecting a companion, and then finding out that she's not coming because
she was like really upset and like crying and everything, right? Like, I lost my friend. And it's like, girl, you haven't even met her yet. You guys could hate each other. But yeah. I guess if you're so lonely all alone.
Well, yeah, I mean, she's like in her family manor in the woods in Austria. And we should mention her dad is English and they try to speak English in the house. But one of the cool details is that they speak a hodgepodge of languages that's like French, German, English, you know, like broken English and the non-broken English, I suppose, that they're speaking, but it's kind of like a hodgepodge of languages.
But doesn't she even say in the book that she's not going to do that here because it'd be too confusing?
Yeah,
she'll just
be
speak in English,
too.
Which is cool. I like that, you know, she's talking to us.
I think it'd be fun to see a movie where where you see a family that speaks like that, using like several languages.
I feel like I've at least seen it in person.
Yeah.
Especially with Spanish and some German, just the mix. And for a second, you're like, oh my gosh, I understand Spanish. And then you're like, oh wait, no, they're speaking English. They switched again. It's fun. I love hearing that hodgepodge.
So then the story takes kind of a Grand Theft Auto turn.
It's actually, it's not a hodgepodge. It's called code.
Babel.
No, it's called code switching.
That's different though. Code switching is more like my understanding
languages.
Is like when you're around people like you talk one way, but then when you go to work and talk to strangers, you speak differently.
No.
Oh. That's one just definition.
Code switching in linguistics is where I'm pulling it from, is the switch between two or more languages in a single conversation. So when we hear someone switching from German to English or Spanish to English, for instance, that's code switching.
Okay.
I've always heard it. I learned it.
I've always heard it in relation to primarily Black Americans, like how they'll speak amongst themselves compared to like their white coworkers.
Or not a society, within a cultural. That's more of a cultural thing. I'm talking a linguistics.
Got it.
But yes, okay. I see what you're saying now.
Yeah. So we have the situation where Laura's living with her dad. She finds out her friend, who she never met but still was looking forward to, is not coming because she's dead. And then it gets all Grand Theft Auto. And they're just like...
Grand Theft Auto?
They're just like outside. And then this carriage comes through. A 4-horse carriage, I think they describe it as, with like 2 riders in front and 2 riders in back escorting it. So they're like, ooh, this is a carriage of a statesman or something. But the carriage is going all crazy fast. And it like turns over. They hit a tree or a pole. I forget. But they're like crossing the bridge on the way to the castle. And it like overturns. And then this woman comes out. And they have to like take this younger woman with her out of the carriage. And she's knocked unconscious. This is Carmilla. And the older woman's like, I gotta go. I'm like, really gotta get to where I'm going. So how about you just watch her for 3 months? They're like,
okay.
Okay. And Laura's like, please let her stay. Please, please.
look, she's young and beautiful. She'll be my friend, because that's all that matters.
Yeah. So they're like, yeah, it would, because they're English. They're like, it would be our honor to watch your kid for 3 months. And then they like set the carriage back up. And there was actually a third woman in the carriage, like a black woman in a turban who you just imagine is like petting a black cat or something.
There's our Orientalism, folks, which we'll talk more about later.
Oh, yeah, for sure. There's actually a pretty cool comment by the editor about this character. But yeah, we've seen that kind of character before where they're, I don't know, someone with a dark skin and a turban suddenly adds like magical elements to.
Well, and in Gothic
like in Wolfman, there's that character too, right?
And like I said, we'll talk about it more later, but in Gothic literature in the beginning, it was a staple to have some kind of Orientalism within the story.
Cool. We'll talk, cool that we'll talk about that. Yeah. So she was expecting somebody that she found out wasn't coming, and then a new person like literally gets spilled out onto the ground as this carriage like upturns.
What are the chances?
Yeah. And
how convenient.
And like at first, Laura really wants to talk to her, but like the servants take Carmilla in because she's still kind of like passed out and dazed. So they take her to the room she's going to stay in and let her sleep. And they're like, no, Laura, don't talk to her right now. She's, been through this traumatic accident. So let her rest. But Laura is very excited to meet this new friend.
It's so ridiculous. How do people make friends back then? Like, what?
Well, I mean, there's a couple times.
Hi, nice to meet you. We have things in common. Let's be friends. No, you're young, beautiful, and look somewhat wealthy. Therefore, we're allowed to be friends. It's so weird.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they have many options. And it just so happens that
then why not be friends with all the people you're surrounded by?
Well, because they're like old people. Laura at this time is 19 years old when she starts this story. We also know that she is dead, which is interesting. That happens in...
Not right now in the story, but later on.
Yeah. So this is one of the cool things about the story is that like it has that frame in the beginning where the story written by Laura, the character, is found and bundled in a manuscript with a note from the doctor who she like had correspondence with.
And this is similar to The Castle of Otranto by Walpole. He does the same thing, except as the author's note, not as like the quote-unquote prologue kind of thing.
Interesting. Yeah. So, we know that it's going to go bad for her, but this is just her story. And she ends up meeting her new friend, Carmilla, once, she's gotten some rest. And would you believe it? She is beautiful, this Carmilla.
Oh, whoops. Did I give that away as a spoiler already? My bad.
And not only is she beautiful, but they both have memories of a very forming event in their lives.
It's called trauma.
Well, I guess you could get trauma based off a dream. I don't know. But when Laura was about 6 years old, she tells this story. It's like the first time she remembers being scared. She had a dream that she woke up in her room and there was a beautiful woman there who she didn't recognize. And this woman crawls into bed with her and they like cuddle. And then Laura in the dream falls asleep, but then is awakened because she feels like I forgot what the line is. We should probably read it. It felt like 2 needles piercing into her breast.
I know that later she says it's a dream when she talks to Carmilla, but I thought that when she explained it to us, the reader, that she didn't consider it a dream. It was like an event in her mind.
Oh, like, so she did get awakened.
Yeah, so here we go. The first occurrence of my life, which produced a terrible impression upon my mind, was one of the very earliest incidents I can recollect. Some people will think it is so trifling that it should not be recorded here. And then she goes on to say, I can't have been more than 6 years old the night I awoke and from my bed failed to see the nursery maid. Neither was my nurse there, and I thought myself alone. I was not frightened, for I was one of those happy children, yada, yada. So she indicates that it was not a dream, but that it was
So the dream part was seeing the woman, but then she wakes up because she actually woke up when she felt the piercing in her breast.
No, she is awake. Okay, let me keep reading. I was vexed and insulted at finding myself neglected, and I began to whimper in preparation for a burst of sobs. It was only then that I saw the solemn but very pretty face looking at me from the side of the bed. The young lady was kneeling with her hands under the coverlet. I looked at her with a kind of pleased wonder and ceased whimpering. She caressed me with her hands and lay down beside me on the bed. She drew me toward her, smiling. I felt immediately soothed and fell asleep again. This was the sensation that woke me, as if 2 needles ran into my breast, very deep at the same moment. So she recollects being awoken, but not that this memory is a dream itself.
Oh, so it was Carmilla then. So when they see each other, Carmilla's like, I had a dream that I was in this bedroom.
That I saw you before. And yes, so...
Okay, that's right.
Yes, but so then she thinks it was a dream. I think is what happens there is then she convinces herself or has faulty memory since everyone else like, no, nothing happened, you're fine. But she did not label it as a dream at first.
Okay. But when they see each other, they're like, hey, I remember you from that event. And from Carmilla's
point... But then they called it a dream.
Right.
Yeah.
So they're like, whoa, that's crazy, you know, that... And I don't know, being a young, isolated...
We're going to be best friends
adult,
now.
Yeah, they're like, I guess this means we're best friends. And they're immediately drawn to each other. It's a really interesting depiction of a vampire because she's like beautiful and radiant and her mind is very active. She's very intelligent and can discuss a wide array of topics and all these things. But she's physically very languid and like slow and tired. Like they go on walks sometimes and basically describes Carmilla as being like a toddler and like getting tired right away. So she's just like, you know, kind of, you can imagine just this beautiful woman swooning on the couch and just kind of laying around and being very lethargic. And then Laura feels very attracted to her, but also repulsed. I don't know where in the vampire mythos, like which parts of these established these kind of tropes or not, but I'll just go ahead and read this quote about the way that Laura felt toward Carmilla. The truth is, I felt rather unaccountably towards the beautiful stranger. I did feel, as she said, drawn towards her, but there was also something of repulsion. In this ambiguous feeling, however, the sense of attraction immensely prevailed. She interested and won me. She was so beautiful and so indescribably engaging. So that's definitely a vampire trope, right? Of being just completely entrapped and infatuated, but there is that part of you that's like...
horrified.
Oh, terrified, right? But you try to just push that down because you're like so attracted to this person, but there's, you know, your insides are screaming.
I also like that I said horrified and you said terrified, and we're going to talk about that later too and what the difference is.
Oh, very cool.
I feel like that's always been a thing, not always a thing, but that doesn't that become an attribute of vampires? It's like they can lure you with music or their beauty or their eyes can entrance you, that kind of thing.
Yeah, they definitely have like a charm aura.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and they're immediately, it's actually really cool because they have, I don't know, regular conversations. They love spending time with each other. They like become basically the best friends that they want to be. But then every now and then Carmilla gets really strange and she'll get like super intense with Laura and start saying things like, we'll love each other until we die. And Laura's like, excuse me? And she's like, no, never mind.
Here's a quote of an instance of this. Sometimes, an hour of apathy, my strange and beautiful companion would take my hand and hold it with a fond pressure, renewed again and again, blushing softly, gazed in my face with a languid and burning eyes, and breathing so fast that her dress rose and fell with a tumultuous respiration. It was like the ardor of a lover. It embarrassed me. It was hateful and yet overpowering. And with gloating eyes, she drew me to her. Her hot lips traveled along my cheek in kisses. And she would whisper, almost in sobs, "You are mine. You shall be mine. You and I are one forever." Then she would throw herself back in her chair with her small hands over her eyes, leaving me trembling.
Yeah, so they've got a freaky relationship going on for sure. And what's interesting about this attraction is there's lots of like kissing on the cheek and like brushing each other softly with their skin, but they never like explicitly become an item, I guess. I don't know.
No.
Not by name. Although there's definitely,
it's
according
innocent.
to the editor who worked on the copy that I have, there's definitely an orgasm in there. Her editorial note is like, how is this not an orgasm? So,
because it was written by a man, obviously.
So check this out. This is later on in the book. So they kind of are just like hang out languidly together for a lot of the book, and with these like weird, intense moments. Towards the end, after their relationship becomes a little more dangerous to Laura and she starts showing signs of like sickness and delirium and things like this, she starts having these really intense dreams. After all these dreams, you know what, I'm just going to do both paragraphs because you'll hear about the dreams and then we'll get there. This is all foreplay. It's why it's taking a while.
Said like a true man. Sorry, I couldn't resist. Couldn't resist that one.
The prevailing one was of that pleasant, peculiar, cold thrill we feel while bathing, when we move against the current of a river. This was soon accompanied by dreams that seemed interminable and were so vague that I could never recollect their scenery and persons. But they left an awful impression and a sense of exhaustion, as if I had passed through a long period of great mental exertion and danger. After all these dreams, there remained on waking a remembrance of having been in a place very nearly dark, and of having spoken to people whom I could not see, and especially of one clear voice, a woman's very deep, that spoke as if at a distance, producing always the same sensation of indescribable solemnity and fear. Sometimes there came a sensation as if a hand was drawn softly along my cheek and neck. Sometimes it was as if warm lips kissed me longer and more lovingly as they reached my throat, and there the caress fixed itself. My heart beat faster, my breathing rose and fell rapidly. Then came a sobbing that rose into a sense of strangulation and turned into a dreadful convulsion. There's the word, convulsion, in which my senses left me and I became unconscious. And the editor note is, if this isn't an orgasm, nothing is.
And that's an intense one. I mean, she passed out from it?
Yeah,
Jeez.
like lost her breath.
No, it said she lost consciousness.
Yeah. So,
wow,
yeah.
I'm impressed.
Yeah, well, I mean...
Maybe I should become a lesbian. Oh, man.
They just needed a toe curl in there to really, like, top it off.
Jeez.
Okay, all right, moving on. Okay, so there's the orgasm for y'all. You can stop listening now if you were waiting for the sexy parts. That was it.
Now let's get dry and talk about gothic literature.
Oh God. Well, hold on. Okay, so
no, I'm just teasing because it get dry, you know.
Yeah. Oh, I got it. All right. Before we move into gothic literature, what else should we say about the book? Let's talk about, let's basically just go to the end, because a lot of it is like them forming this relationship and how over time it becomes more intense, and you get the sense that Laura is starting to turn to a vampire as well. It seems like it's like the way people turn into vampires is definitely a little different here, because it makes it sound like she was bit by Carmilla, you know, when she was 6.
And then she basically claimed Laura at that time as being hers.
Which is kind of like a Nosferatu thing.
Yeah, and I think so then, therefore, she killed Mademoiselle Reinhardt, right? Is that her name? Her friend that was supposed to come. Because she died of the same illness or whatever that's starting to overtake Laura. I think she got rid of her potential friend so she could then place herself in that position.
Yeah, I feel like, too, that it seems like it's not just... When I think of vampires, I think like you get bit, you turn. Where this almost feels like...
No, not always. I mean, I've read some literature where vampires have their sheep in one book I've read. And it's just humanoids that know it's a vampire and like are willing to be fed on because they're under the influence. It's like being a drug addict.
Interesting.
And they're not turned. And even I think in like Interview with the Vampire and stuff, there are specific things that need to happen in order for you to turn. You have to drink the other vampire's blood in that instance. So usually I think you just get your blood sucked and then you move on, or if they suck all your blood, then you die. Yeah, there's a lot of
I've definitely
variation.
seen the thing where like someone's like, give me just a little taste of blood and you'll be fine. But this one, it feels like Carmilla definitely has some kind of aura, like them physically being together seems to also be a factor in draining the life from Laura.
I thought that she was just feeding on her at night. And that's why she's having these dreams, and it's slowly killing her. I feel like it's like Nosferatu, you know, he isolates her. Well, I don't know. He didn't really isolate her to begin with, but she's feeling isolated. She wants companionship. He comes to her. And I feel like this is kind of the same, but it's manufactured through Carmilla that she would be alone and therefore gets what she wants, which is Laura.
So towards the end of the book, their relationship gets stranger and stranger. Eventually, General Spielsdorf, the guy who was originally going to visit until his niece died, does come back, and he's like, I got some news. And he sends a letter, and he's like, yeah, so my niece died, and it's because of this companion who she also suddenly became friends with, and then started exhibiting all these symptoms. And he talked to doctors and has come around to believing the theory that it was a vampire and that there's a vampire in the area. So he comes back and he describes, it's kind of like the fisherman. So Amber mentioned in our fisherman episode that a story is told about like an area and what happens there. And then that story's over and the characters go through what was described. Hopefully that makes sense if you listen to the episode. But essentially what happens here is he comes and he tells the whole story of what happened to his niece, how it was similar to them. It was actually a really cool scene. So he's at a masquerade and is approached by an older woman who talks to him and seems familiar to him, but he just can't place her. And suddenly she's like, oh crap, I gotta go. And is like, hey, can you like watch my daughter here who is playing with the niece who died at the beginning?
Mademoiselle Reinfeldt.
Yeah, so they're just like at a costume party, like a mask costume party. This woman refuses to take her mask off. And it's kind of a cool conversation because she's like, if I take off my mask, I give up my advantage. So why would I do that? And ends up just agreeing for this guy to be like, yeah, I'll watch your daughter. I don't know who you are or who she is, but sure, I'll do it.
And it's totally okay that you want to have the advantage over me. Whatever.
Yeah. So they're like, yeah, we'll take care of her like one of our own. And then his daughter ends up dying after that. So basically, yeah, the character comes and like describes all this, and Laura's like, wait a second. Everyone's like, isn't this exactly what's happening to you? So then we get another trope. They bring in a vampire hunter. It's not Van Helsing, but it sounds like a Van Helsing type character. He's like all in black, has a wide brimmed hat and long hair, grizzled, and it has like the things needed to destroy a vampire for good. This vampire hunter comes and he's like descended from an older vampire hunter in his family who had also been hunting this vampire. But yeah, he has like his different, I don't know, ornaments or whatever the word is to get rid of the vampire. And what they end up doing is they find the coffin of Carmilla and like take it off. And it's a pretty cool detail because they like find the body in there and she's like breathing shallowly.
Yeah, in pristine condition for being buried.
And is in a pool of blood. And one of the pictures in the illustrated edition I read is cool because they're like stabbing her and she's in a blood-filled coffin. It's pretty cool. They put a stake through her heart, cut off her head, and then burn the remains. I feel like that specific killing, did that happen in Nosferatu also? Not to Nosferatu, but when they like... I've seen
the stabbing through the heart is like the thing that
but also
always
the beheading
kills.
and the burning.
Yeah,
I feel like I've read that before.
Yeah, they did that. You're talking about the new Nosferatu that we just saw recently. Yeah, because he follows the virgin on the horse into the graveyard and they open the coffin, kill and then I believe they have a bonfire after that.
That's right.
But what's interesting about Carmilla too is that she sleeps most of the day, but she does come out during the day.
Yeah, she's not like, doesn't get burned up by the sun or anything like that.
It's kind of like in Oblivion.
She does sleep in very late. So there is definitely like a preference for nighttime.
Yeah. Well, okay. So
yeah, please explain.
I am playing Oblivion right now, Elder Scrolls Oblivion, because they surprise released it. And that's all I've been wanting to do. But of course, one of the first things I accidentally did was become a vampire. And it's useful, but it's also really annoying because the longer you go without feeding, the more vampire-esque you become. And then you like can't stay out in the sun. But if you have recently fed on someone, you can be out in full sunlight and it's fine.
Oh,
so my guess is that it's some version of that maybe. And because she's feeding every night on Laura, that she can do that, or it's just not a thing yet. And sunlight has no effect on vampires.
Yeah.
But I thought that one of the original things that created the mythos of vampires was based on people with skin conditions like albinos and such who have really fair skin and are sensitive to the sun.
Oh, yeah.
So it's interesting that this wouldn't be an issue for Carmilla. Anyway.
Yeah.
Food for thought.
Yeah. That's basically the quick description of it, of their friendship, and then, the effects of the feeding on Laura, and then finally disposing of Carmilla in her sarcophagus and ridding the Austria of its local vampire. But yeah, it was cool. I mean, they found
the Austria.
the Austria. Did I say that?
Yeah, you
I
did.
guess that's kind of German, Der Austria or whatever.
Österreich.
Österreich. Oh, yeah.
It's not Austria. It's Österreich.
Is that Der D or Das? I forgot. Isn't it with nations you always
No, that's
gender?
Der Schweiz. Der Schweiz is specific.
But otherwise, I feel like I don't know.
I'm trying to think like Der Deutschland. That sounds weird. The Germany. You don't.
Yeah.
I don't think you do that.
Yeah. Oh well.
And if so, I don't know. I can't answer that without Googling it, and I'm not going to do it.
Yeah. Well, I think we can start going into the book's relation to Gothic literature. Just a few things I'll mention that are obvious, like Gothic tropes, which could have started here or been passed on. I don't know. But like we mentioned, it has like the old estate in the woods, a decaying family manor. When they go to kill off Carmilla, they find her in like the ruins of an old family estate. So that's pretty tropey. Just generally the ornate gilded descriptions of the setting and stuff like that. But you know what? You know more about this, so
it has a sense of the sublime.
There we go. Oh, let's get into it.
Okay.
Are subtle and not so subtle orgasmic metaphors part of the Gothic? I feel like it might be.
Yeah, actually that's a good way to get me into this topic, because I was like, I have a lot of information and I didn't really know how to put it together in a cohesive way that's not just like a lecture. So yes, actually one of the books that I was going to bring up, which is one of my favorite Gothic books that I have read, is The Monk by Matthew Gregory Lewis. So The Monk was one of the first influential Gothic books, and it was written in 1796. It was not the first. The first is considered The Castle of Otranto by Walpole, and that's also a really good book, and we'll talk about that one as well. But The Monk has a lot of sexual tension in it. The difference is that it's opposite, and it's masculine desire is what's explored as opposed to feminine desire. And it uses women as like a place of sexual danger, because the main character is a monk. If you couldn't gather that from the title, he is he thinks he's a good person, but he's not. And there's this element of danger for him. He's tempted by a temptress character, and he's also in love with a young maiden and forces himself on her. So there's a lot of dark, dismal, messed up themes in that takes place in an old monastery with like a dark basement that she gets locked in and she has to find her way out. It's like a maze. So it's the same kind of thing. With the setting is always very important with Gothic literature. So not in every book that I've read. I mean, I've only read a handful. I really want to read Radcliffe. I haven't read any of her stuff. It's also on my TBR, but yeah, a lot of what the monk covers is like confrontation of dark thoughts, pushing against the, I wrote it in German, against the Aufklärung, which is enlightenment. So those were kind of looking at big pictures. Let's be positive. Let's look forward into the future. And then Gothic came around and it's like, well, actually, let's look a little bit in the past. So with that, you get a lot of Roman history, hence the Gothic literature. This is a look back at times of chivalric knights, and there's a lot of Orientalism. Actually, one of the books I wanted to mention is Vathek by Beckford. That was published in 1786. That's considered like the second Gothic novel. That actually takes place in Iraq. And again, a lot of themes of desire, not so much the big broody castle that comes a little bit later in some aspects, or is just not worked into this one because it takes place in like a faraway place. And so it has that other element, and they can talk about things in society and such that are considered taboos. And talking about taboos is a huge thing in Gothic literature. And the way that they're able to do that without getting in trouble with the church is by saying, well, this is a different culture. They're quote unquote savages. So of course you can't blame me. I'm just the author. These people are the ones who are doing the bad things. So by creating that sense of other, they can explore sexuality and fear and horror and trauma and all these things in a way that was non-threatening to the author in a time when books were just starting to become mainstream. Printing became much more available. So you were getting actual like books for entertainment more so than just religious texts. So this is another point of Gothic literature, is it's pulling away from what used to generally be religious works. Even if it was considered fiction, the themes were often religious in nature just because that's what books always were. So this is like a break away from that as well. One of my favorite things about Gothic literature is the exploration of terror and horror, and they are considered two different things, which is kind of fun. But I still to this day get them mixed up because they're so similar. But I have a quote from Anne Radcliffe, who is the author of a number of books, but The Mysteries of Udolpho is probably one of her most well-known. She says about terror and horror, "Terror and horror are so far opposite that the first expands to the soul and awakens the facilities to a high degree of life. The other contracts, freezes, and nearly annihilates them." So what she's saying there is that terror is the obscurity of a thing, of a fear or trauma or taboo, and horror is the presentation of that thing.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So when looking at Carmilla, when we're talking about terror, terror is, for instance, when Laura is a young girl, she has this incident. It is traumatic. It scars her in a sense. Also just the terror of not knowing what's happening to her as she starts to get sick. And then the horror aspect comes especially at the end, or like the instances when Carmilla gets all like, "I love you, we'll be together forever," but also at the very end when they kill her and we see her in her pool of blood and that she really is a monster. And I just love that juxtaposition. And another really good example of the difference between horror and terror is in Frankenstein. We see it through Victor. So there is the terror of the unknown, and then Victor Frankenstein creates the monster. He shifts from horror to terror when he creates the monster.
Wouldn't it be the other way around? Terror to horror? Because isn't the monster then the horror? Because
yes, did I say it backwards?
Yeah.
See, I warned you.
That's what I'm here for.
Yes, it switches from terror, which is the obscure, to horror, which is the presentation of it, which is the monster. So that's a really good way of visualizing it, because then he's tormented by what he's done. Well, he should be if he was a good person.
Interesting. And then so like different people, like fans of horror, I'm sure are like different on the spectrum between whether they like the terror or the horror aspect more.
Modern horror has changed a lot. Modern horror is not gothic because of a lot of the themes, what they're looking for. Yeah, there are bits and pieces, but it's kind of like the branch down has spread out so much. There's a lot that's not there. But I mean, yeah, you could definitely say that. So if you prefer, I guess, the tension buildup, then you would prefer a terror horror or terror
horror.
Well, it doesn't work.
Is terror horror or horror?
I'm talking the name of the genre. So I guess you prefer terror in a film if you like that slow buildup, and you prefer horror in a film if you want to see, like body horror, for example.
So like a slasher is somebody who likes slashers maybe likes
horror
more.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you can't. There's no real genre called terror.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, and it's changed. Even within Gothic literature, things shift. There are different generations of, because for instance, Mary Shelley is in like the second generation of Gothic writing. So even then, it has changed a bit. Some things outside of literature that are interesting to think about with the exploration of Gothic literature is paintings are also can be looked at to get that sense, because it plays in tandem with the Aufklärung, which is, what is it in English?
The Enlightenment. The
Enlightenment, and pushes and pulls off these ideas. But both of those things play in tangent with the idea of the sublime. And the sublime is hard to explain, but it's this sense of beauty and overwhelmed by that beauty. It's kind
of the way Carmilla overwhelms Laura, basically. Sort of. Kind of like an otherworldly charm.
It creates a sense of wonderment and awe. So, okay, what I was going to say is like with paintings. So one of my favorite painters is Caspar David Friedrich. There's this painting, I believe it's called The Wanderer, and it's a man standing on top of a mountain looking out over a sea of clouds. And it's just, he's a hiker who's reached the peak of this mountain. And in this painting, you get this sense that he's small in relation to the world. But he's reached this peak, he's overcome the difficulties to get there, and he's just in a state of awe, like, wow, I made it. This is absolutely amazing. And that feeling is what the sublime is. Does that make sense?
So it's like an orgasm.
Yes. So, okay. Yeah, pretty much. So, and if you're interested in learning more about the sublime, Edmund Burke is a great person to look at. He talks a lot about the ideas of the sublime, terror, and obscurity, and he was one of the people who helped form the tone of Gothic literature. And he actually happened to also be Irish, just like our author.
Oh, look at the Irish with their vampires.
Yeah, so that's fun.
Cool.
Like some things also that can be pulled in are ideas from, they would pull in ideas from like Milton. His Paradise Lost is one that gets a lot of pull from.
Yep, I read that during COVID. It was great.
Yeah, and can you see the sense of the sublime, the obscure, and all that in there? Yeah, so it's just a tone. And if you read enough Gothic... The
Devil's actually a really cool character in that book.
Yeah, if you read enough Gothic literature, and I'm talking like 18th, 19th century Gothic literature, you'll just kind of know. It just makes sense. You're like, oh, okay, I get the tone, I get the feel. It all kind of, it might have a different setting and such. And as time goes on, Gothic literature became more okay with being close to home. You know, like Jane Eyre takes place in England, but she's isolated. But it's okay now to have it be in a Christian country because it's already been established as a genre that people are willing to put up with, in a sense.
Put up with?
Well, I'm talking like...
This was pre-Buffy.
Publishers and... Yes, exactly.
I've actually never watched Buffy. I'm woefully underprepared.
So one thing that I failed to mention earlier when I was talking about the beginnings of Gothic literature. So Horace Walpole wrote The Castle of Otranto, and this is considered the first Gothic literature book. Walpole was, I think he was either open, bi, I believe he was gay though, and it was a not very well kept secret, but he was rich and he used some of what he had to go through in life and what he wanted his life to be. Like he recreated a Gothic castle to live in for himself, but he used that as the backdrop of his tale. And there's some political things going on there. The Whigs and the Tories are at each other, and you can see, if you know anything about British politics, you can see those two sides being represented by characters within the book. And his father was also, I believe, an important Whig or a Tory, I can't remember which. But so, you know, he's pulling in modern stuff that we today aren't going to get. But what I really loved is that he injects some comedy into his story, which he gets from Shakespeare. And Shakespeare is another influential writer, I mean, for all literature, but for Gothic as well. And what Walpole does is he uses Shakespeare's rejection of Aristotle's Poetics, saying that tragedy and comedy cannot mix. And Shakespeare said, no, that is wrong. Shakespeare is obviously correct because we are still reading Shakespeare. We are also still reading the Poetics, but I think more people have read Shakespeare than the Poetics. And Walpole also pulls those together. And again, sexuality comes in. Heteronormativity is also questioned within this story. And then I'll just end by, I wanted to point out some precursors, some books that were written around the same time, and then some that came after and were influenced by Carmilla and other books. So before, we have The Castle of Otranto, Vathek, The Mysteries of Udolpho, The Monk, Frankenstein. I've mentioned all those already. And then Polidori's The Vampyre, which was in 1819. This, I think, gave some context for Carmilla as well. So then around the same time, just before actually, the Brontë sisters wrote their books. So Emily Brontë wrote Wuthering Heights in 1847, which is about a little more than 10 years before. In the same year, Charlotte Brontë wrote Jane Eyre. And about 10 years before Carmilla, Charles Dickens wrote Bleak House. And then afterward, so stories that were either influenced by Gothic literature in general and potentially by Carmilla, but are still considered Gothic novels. We have Robert Louis Stevenson's Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in 1886, Oscar Wilde's The Picture of Dorian Gray, obviously Bram Stoker's Dracula, Henry James's The Turn of the Screw, and I'm just going to say his last name, Leroux, it's probably wrong, The Phantom of the Opera. So these are all like pivotal.
I've read all those except Phantom of the Opera.
Really?
Yeah.
Cool. You've read Wuthering Heights?
Oh, except for those two books.
And Jane Eyre?
Except, oh, damn it.
Okay, so you just forgot about the women author. You've read Radcliffe? No, you did not read any of, you've read maybe half of these. You have not read The Castle of Otranto. Oh. You have not read Vathek.
Oh, you said like 3 in a row that I read.
Mysteries. Okay, so you've read Frankenstein.
No, I haven't. I've read Dracula.
Read Frankenstein?
I've never read Frankenstein. And
Okay,
you
you've
like
read-
don't like it so much that
I've read it like, okay.
I've read Dracula and
Let's save
Dr.
that for
Jekyll and
another day.
Mr. Hyde, and there's one other one.
We should read Frankenstein. It would be really fun because I bet you'll love it. And I cannot get myself to like that book. I know how important it is. I've read it in school twice. I've read it like 5 times. Anyway, you've read Bleak House.
No.
Okay, so you've read the things that came after. You've read Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde.
Yes.
Dorian Gray.
Yes.
Dracula.
Yes.
Turn of the Screw.
Yes.
And then not Phantom of the Opera.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've read this stuff from like the late
That's what I meant.
19th
The stuff
century.
after. Yeah, I've read all the after.
Okay.
things.
Completely different, but that was probably long and boring for a lot of people, but that is...
Don't say that.
It's fine. I heard you yawning.
Well,
So a lot of that information came from a class that I took in graduate school that was British Gothic. So that was very focused on British Gothic. Unfortunately, I was not able to take the German Gothic course because it was at the same time, literally at the same time as my English Gothic, which was really unfortunate because I would have loved to do both. But yeah, so it's very Anglo-centric, my little spiel there. But to be fair, Gothic literature, while pulling very heavily from German literature and other places, is, I believe, considered the original origins of Gothic literature.
wait.
Thank you for coming to my TED
Did
Talk.
you just say Gothic literature is the origins of Gothic literature?
No, English.
Oh, English.
English Gothic literature.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, vampire seems very
Brits.
English. I'm going to do a much shorter spiel on a little bit of research I did about vampires. Because a lot of what I come across, and especially with the marketing, it's like Carmilla's the original vampire story. Then Dracula copied it, and that's not quite true. First of all, I couldn't find out if Bram Stoker had read this book, because as we mentioned, it came out about 25 years before Dracula, also by an Irish author.
I read that I can't tell you exactly where, but I did read that it was an influence.
I read that it was an influence too, but it was just mentioned like this was an influence. But I wanted to see if I could find out, like, I don't know, like Bram's, I don't know if authors did interviews and stuff back then, but like just because it was around doesn't and shares a lot of characteristics, I don't know that it necessarily means, oh, he read it. I don't know.
But he was writing Gothic literature.
Yeah,
He had
so
to know the
probably.
tropes and stuff. At
Yeah.
that point, I think Carmilla was popular. It's actually, they made a movie of it in the 60s. So
Yeah. Who knows?
1960s, obviously. But I'm sure it was around.
Yeah. Oh, well, it was around because it was published 25 years before. Oh, I guess that doesn't necessarily mean it was around.
But 25
I think it
years
was.
is not that. I mean, you think about today, sure, you got hundreds of books coming out a year. But
Yeah. What I did find, though, is something even more interesting. What I'm trying to get to is Varney the Vampire or The Feast of Blood. This is awesome. So this came before Carmilla. And this is just something that I found that came before then. I still didn't really get the answer of like vampire was probably in the vernacular at that point. I assume everyone knew at that point what a vampire was, but I don't know how often like vampire stories were being told. Okay.
So what I came across, the first instance that I've seen of a vampire in literature was from a German poet, Heinrich August Ostenfelder, and it was called The Vampire in 1748. Is this predate that?
Oh, no, this is 8. Okay. Well, I'll answer that question by describing it a little bit because it's actually pretty interesting. So Varney the Vampire was first serialized between 1845 and 1847 in a series of weekly cheap pamphlets of a kind known as penny dreadfuls. You've got a book, like a 1,000-page book of a bunch of penny dreadfuls.
I just bought a big one of penny dreadfuls.
So what's interesting is the author was paid by the typeset line. So Varney the Vampire, when it was published, ran 876 double-columned pages and 232 chapters. Altogether, it nears it's almost 667,000 words. So this guy's like, and it was attributed to 2 authors. They're like, we're going to get paid, dude.
Was he pulling a Tolkien and like describing the scene, like literally the trees? Jeez.
But there's some other pretty interesting facts here. All right. It's the tale of the vampire Sir Francis Varney. It doesn't quite have the ring of Carmilla or Dracula. And it introduced many of the tropes present in vampire fiction recognizable to modern audiences. It was the first story to refer to sharpened teeth for a vampire, noting with a plunge he seized her neck in his fang-like teeth. And then just one more point on Varney. The story is at times inconsistent and confusing, as if the author did not know whether to make Varney a literal vampire or simply a human who acts like one. So I think this 667,000 word story was written at a breakneck speed with some loose threads.
So he was a pantser.
Huh?
He was a pantser.
He's a pantser.
Not a planner. He was a pantser writer.
Yeah.
For those of you who don't know what that means, there's planner and pantser. A pantser is someone who writes off the seat of their pants, and a planner is someone who, outlines and actually makes a cohesive story before they write it out. So this guy was obviously a pantser.
Pantser, no editor.
Jeez.
But still, I don't know, pretty cool.
Probably made a good bit of money there. Does it tell you how much, do you know how much he ended up making for that story?
I don't know. It just said paid by the line, but it didn't say how much. Maybe a penny? Is that why they're penny dreadfuls? I don't know.
I thought that's because they cost a penny, but I could be wrong.
Oh, I mean, it might have been because it is described as weak, cheaply pamphlets. So I'm not sure.
That's hilarious.
Hopefully, was able to retire off Varney the Vampire.
Injecting comedy.
All right, let's talk a little bit about queerness in this book. This is an interesting topic. So there's definitely a lot of lesbian energy going on between these 2 characters, and one of the interesting modern conversations is like where that fits as queer fiction, right? And if it's even important, but what was Fanu thinking when he wrote this? If that was even, I don't even know if queer probably had its different meaning. I don't know if queer was a word for
queer
for
meant
gay at that point, or just weird,
odd.
Yeah, odd,
just funny, not directed at people. I believe. Oh, my friend Alden's going to kick me for this, but I can't remember when the term was gay was first used to describe people. There have been gay and trans people forever, but I think it was the 1890s or something was when it first became
labeled.
A label. Yeah.
Interesting.
So it's surprising. It's later than you would think. I guess it's my long ramble digging my memory, not finding the answer.
But I mean, whether or not Fanu was thinking about any of that stuff when he wrote that, this book is super gay. And what does that maybe imply for its legacy? Some of the conversation I was reading about in terms of why is Dracula so much more well known when Carmilla does the gothic vampire setting so well too. And one of the ideas was female love, which whether or not, they had whatever they were calling it, it was still looked down upon in Victorian society, right? So is that perhaps why maybe Dracula did better? Because that book has a lot more masculine energy, and this is a little, I don't know, too gay for the mainstream Victorian public. I don't know.
I don't think the problem would have been that it was too gay. I think that it would maybe have been too feminine focused.
Right.
I think that they had more problem with women specifically than sexuality. I mean, obviously everything was repressed back then, but
not like it is today.
I mean, yeah,
I know what you mean.
There's a full on a man forcing himself on a woman's scene in The Monk. So, I mean, sexuality is there, but it's a man, so it makes it okay. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting to talk about though, and I'm curious where this book rests in. I don't know. Is it considered, queer fiction? Has it been accumulated in that way? I don't know.
Well, one thing that I read was that the lesbian vampire genre has its roots in this book.
Oh, I could see that.
So with that, then yes, I would say, I mean, queer society should 100% take this book and be like, haha, it's ours now.
Yeah, I mean, I would claim it, whether or not Fanu meant that, if he or like intended that at all. It definitely reads like that. I would take it as mine.
Well, but now we're getting into literary theory.
Right.
Do we talk about death of the author? Does it matter?
Yeah.
I mean, because Walpole was not straight, I think, or there was, it's hard to know exactly because it was all pushed under the rug, but it existed and it comes out in people's writing.
I mean, he could have written it from the point of view of like a metaphor for why you shouldn't have queer relationships, right? I don't know if that's true. Or maybe he
was gay and this was his way of getting it out. And he's like, well, if it's women, it's other, and then it won't come back to me and be like, wow, you wrote about 2 gay men. You must be gay. Huh. It's so hard to know because we don't know what the conversation would have been like back then.
Yeah,
would that have even come
Instagram
up?
Or anything?
No, what a jerk. He could have tried a little.
But still, I mean, it's undoubtedly, the queerness is like a huge part of their relationship. And
it's cool to see in a book written in the 19th century.
It is very cool. And
because it's so blatant too. It's not subtle. Like there are a lot of, like I feel a lot of books when I've discussed queer theory, it's like, oh, these are some indicators that might indicate that they meant queerness here and there, but no, this is definitely queer.
And I wonder how much of an influence, I mean, you mentioned this influence specifically like lesbian vampire fiction, but I wonder how much of it influenced just the general vampire mythology, because there's definitely like a lot of sexiness up in vampires, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think from what I read, it did influence Dracula, and then Dracula, it created, I mean, they made Nosferatu based off of Dracula. So, I mean, that's kind of just the origin of vampires. But maybe what Carmilla did was create that sensual, sexual being that a vampire is. Because, the idea is sucking the life out of someone and putting your mouth on someone is a sexual act, whether or not you're, I mean,
yeah.
I'm trying to think of an instance where it's not. Actually, in The Monk, one of the characters, the woman who's manipulating the monk, draws snake venom out of him, but it's still looked at least when we discussed it in my class, as a sexual act. So even saving someone's life by drawing venom out of them, it's still sexual. So is that, and where she bites? On the chest?
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
right in the boob.
I mean, granted, this is before they've established that the neck is like the normal place that a vampire bites. But, I mean, there are a lot of places on the body, and she picks her chest, so.
It'd be cool to know, like, what readers picked up then, but I haven't found their journals.
Also, what's interesting is that there are some films that have been made loosely based on Carmilla specifically, not just, vampires.
Oh, I should have watched one. I can picture it, though.
I looked. There's one specifically, Death and Roses, in 1960, but even on IMDb, it didn't list any options of where to find it. So probably buy it on Amazon, like have them mail you the disc. Our library didn't have it and stuff. Canopy didn't have it. So I tried. But also, a side note, an Austrian writer and playwright, Elfriede Jelinek, did a stage play, Illness or Modern Woman, which was a modern retelling of Carmilla.
Oh, that'd be cool.
And that's just that's a fun fact for me, because I wrote a paper on one of her plays about Dornröschen, which is Sleeping Beauty, and there's a lot of sexuality there too. But anyway, it's fun that an Austrian, very feminist Austrian playwright, did a play on Carmilla. So yes, I think it has heavy influences with feminism, with queer theory, with vampire lore, with specifically lesbian vampire genre. I mean,
I want to talk about specifically the edition I read, because it had an interesting editor. So this one was by Lanternfish Press and edited by Carmen Maria Machado.
It's the cover that I use on our Instagram posts.
Yeah, it's a cool cover with Beth. Also, a quick point. Carmilla was originally serialized in the magazine The Dark Blue, and it's cool because you can totally see it because it has short chapters. And a lot of them end on a little twist so that you'll tune in the next week for the next section. Dracula was also serialized in that way. But it's cool.
So was Ulysses. I think a lot of books used to be serialized.
Yeah. It's cool to see how that affected how they are written. At least with this one, it seems very clear with short chapters ending on, a hook or something.
Yeah. Well, you would also get paid more because every time you published in a magazine, you get paid. And then you publish the book on its own again, and then you get paid for the book. So that a friend of mine's doing research on a German author, and she actually has been struggling trying to find what stories were original and what were cut up and serialized, and making sure that they're not overlapping. So yeah, serialization is definitely can be a nightmare for some people, but cool for others.
So this editor... At first I was like, is this a book or is this commentary in the book? Because it has this weird introduction where she basically establishes that Carmilla is based on a real person from history, and there was a real doctor who was corresponding with her, not like the fictional one that they framed the beginning of the story with. And the beginning is talking about how it was based on these real people. And there was actually a lot more information from the girl's point of view that Fanu left out in his retelling. And so the argument is almost that Fanu did a disservice to the story by leaving out more information about the real life story. And I was like, what is this? And I looked it up, and it's just totally made up. It's just some metafiction of this is based on a real story, which is something you come across in books. This
so
was
weird.
A manuscript, but the editor added on an introduction that added this made up idea that it's actually based off of a true story. And then what's interesting is she has notes throughout the book that add fictional elements.
Sounds like your editor wanted to be a writer.
Yeah, it's weird. I don't know how I feel about it. So occasionally throughout the book, we'll meet a character, just a minor character, and then the editor she'll her footnote will be a backstory about what happened with this character. And it felt weird because at first I was like, well, how does she know all this stuff? But it's all just made up. And then occasionally during a scene, if there's a description of something with the orgasm, it'll be the footnote is this was clearly an orgasm. So I don't know. It's weird. I looked up reviews. Some people were like, that was weird. That's not what an editor does. But then I also read a review on a queer book website. It was the Lesberry. It was, I think, instead of the library.
Nice, I love it.
But it was, that reviewer was like, oh, this is really cool. It by adding the modern fun context on top of it, it made an old story come alive. So I don't know, kind of interesting, but how do you feel as an editor of someone reshaping the story a little bit with their own kind of creative commentary?
I feel my first instinct is that's a bad editor, because that's exactly what you're not supposed to do as an editor. You're supposed to keep the writer's story intact and in their voice. So you're changing.
Well, I don't think she'd change stuff in the story.
Right. No, I get that. But you're changing the tone. You're changing how people read it.
Yeah, it's weird.
I mean, I don't know. But I guess it's fine if you make it clear that that's what you're doing. And it sounds like that was not made clear to you at first.
Yeah. If she did say that, I missed it. I was just kind of confused by it.
Because then it seems like it is part of the story.
Yeah.
And then you have an editor who's changing how you read it. I mean...
Yeah, it's weird. Ultimately, at first I was like, I don't like this. But then I asked myself if it made it more interesting. And I was like, oh, it was kind of interesting to see how someone would edit it creatively. I don't know. It was different. It's not something I would want to see often. But a couple reviewers thought it was version.
Cool. I didn't read it, so I like the pictures in it, though.
Oh, I also, there's one other point I want to quickly add in that doesn't really have a place in our topics list, but I came up with our vampire names.
Oh, cool.
So one of the things that Laura discovers about vampires through her ordeal, there's a couple things. First of all, what's really interesting is in this mythos, vampires are created from suicides. So Carmilla originally committed suicide and then became a vampire. So that's kind of interesting. I don't think I had...
Did she have to be bitten by a vampire and then commit suicide?
Ooh, I forgot that detail.
Otherwise, there's going to be a lot of vampires out there.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Maybe. I forgot that specific detail, but for sure she was a suicide. And it's mentioned that vampires are created out of those. Whether it means everyone, I'm not sure. Also, Carmilla, I noticed this, not you because you listened to the book, but when we find out about General Spieldorf's daughter and how she died, her companion's name was Lady Marcilla, or Princess Marcilla.
Which I knew.
Okay.
I knew
Marcilla
her name.
Is just...
but I didn't see it.
Yeah, is Carmilla. Just it's an anagram of Carmilla. So, and they add that into the mythos. There's like vampires can have different names, but it has to be an anagram of their name. So I have 2 vampire names for each of us. I can be Andil or Leniad, and you can be...
Wait, say them again?
Andil, Andiel, so like Andil.
Okay.
And then Leniad, Leniad.
I don't know which one I like more. Do you like one more than the other?
Leniad. I kind of like Andil.
I do too.
Count Andil.
It sounds a little elfish.
Yeah, it does a little bit. For you, I have Burma. I like Burma and Marib.
That's a country. Wait, what was the second one? Marib. Okay. That's it? Those are my options?
I mean, I did this like 2 minutes before you came in the room to start recording the podcast, so...
I couldn't have it start with an R? I mean, my name backwards is Rebma, but that's not an anagram.
Maybe you could come up with a better one, but for right now, it's Count Andil and Countess Burma.
Okay, I just looked up if Dracula was ever used... as an
Alucard.
Yeah, Alucard. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Apparently Dracula's original name was Count Vampyre, like with a W, because it would have been German. Vampyre. So we'd call him Vampyre. Vampyre.
Vampyre. All right. Okay. Let's move along here now. I see you looking at your phone. We're recording a podcast right now, and you're scrolling on your phone.
I'm looking up stuff about Dracula now. I'm falling into the Wikipedia pit of doom. The Sarlacc pit of Wikipedia.
Oh, speaking of Dracula. So Dracula is often discussed as being influenced by the historical figure Vlad the Impaler.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
Check this out. Vlad was the second son of Vlad Dracul. So Vlad the Impaler's dad, his name was Dracul. So
cool.
That could have been where Dracula came from.
There's also a pretty substantial subgenre of Russian Gothic.
Oh, I bet.
I don't know anything about it, so I didn't bring it up, but that kind of fits in with that. Maybe.
Oh, he signed his letters Dragula, but like Dragulia or Draculia. So he straight up was like, I'm Dracula.
Okay, so cool. Bram Stoker is just pulling from history, which is another sign of Gothic literature.
He apparently impaled like tens of thousands of peasants.
It's by himself, or he like said, off with their head?
No, okay. He would like make them fall on a stake or something. I don't know. It sounded...
You'd push them. like that meme where you're not
Imagine
looking
the Wilhelm
and you just
scream, ah!
Oh, God.
All right, let's finish by just quickly talking about Sinners because we just watched it and it had vampires and that was awesome.
So good.
I just want to talk about it for a minute before we move on to what we're reading.
Yeah, that was great. I knew it was going to be good just from the preview. I mean, music from the South, Michael B. Jordan, as a
two
twin.
characters.
Yeah.
It was so cool.
It was so well done too, how they did that. What do you want to talk about?
It was just cool because, usually vampires are white aristocratic Europeans in faded castles, and that's changed. It's been modernized a bunch by now, but that's kind of like the OG vampire setting. And so to have it be in like rural 1930s Mississippi.
Hold on though. Should we give a spoiler alert or should we not spoil anything?
About Sinners?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. We don't have to say much more. It's just really cool. And it's, vampires in a totally different setting and culture than you usually are exposed to.
It's a serious movie. Yeah, very well done, serious. But there was one scene, and it wasn't quite the scene, but it was almost just like a moment. Like if you paused it and held it in that moment, it reminded me of Shaun of the Dead.
Oh yeah,
which is zombies.
I can see a little bit of that. Yeah.
But it just kind of like everyone got in their ready position, and I was like, oh, it's like Shaun of the Dead.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that was a shout out, but if it was, that was cool. But the style, the music, the costumes, it was just, everything was so good. The characters.
Cool villain too.
I have no complaints about that movie. My only complaint is that we've only seen it once.
Yeah. We might be able to get Alex to see it with us again. Or it'll be streaming in like 2 weeks or whatever anyway. True. I don't know. But yeah, it was really cool. If you have an interest,
Vampires are in. Vampires are in because we just had Nosferatu and now Sinners. I guess we're having 28 years later. So maybe zombies are going to come in and, steal the show. But I feel like, we get waves of
definitely
what's on and what's off. And I don't know.
Was Twilight the last like big vampire hit? Probably.
Oh, God, it can't be.
I think.
I'm
in
sure
terms of
there's
like
been
huge
something.
pop culture awareness.
I don't know. I watched too many horror movies over so many years, that have been. I'm not specific with watching new stuff or old stuff, so I can't say. Are they redoing Interview with the Vampire? I feel like that's a thing.
Oh, I don't know. They redo.
Am I pulling that out of thin air? Okay.
I don't
know why I thought that, but
yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
we were going to watch that movie this weekend, but we didn't. So,
okay. So Linead.
Yes, Burma.
What's
Can
new?
I call you Big Burma?
Big Burma.
A vampire with thighs. That would be breaking a stereotype. We got thick vampires up here.
I don't know if I should be complimented or frustrated or if I should smack you.
All at the same time.
Shit. So.
Yeah, so let's talk about...
So Nad.
Linead.
No, Nad.
Oh.
I've decided.
Okay.
We're doing an anagram of your shortened name.
Okay.
So Nad, what are you reading?
Carmilla.
Wow.
Let's see. Last episode I mentioned that I had started Edward II by Christopher Marlowe. I have finished that play since then. It was a lot of fun to read.
Congratulations.
I was going to read more of the plays, but then the book was due, so I took it back. But it was cool reading some Marlowe, a name that usually comes up alongside Shakespeare, and now I can picture something that he wrote. Besides that, Carmilla. I mean, most of my free time I've been playing guitar, as you know, and it's been really good. I'm really working on my scales and stuff.
Good. It's good to switch it up and not just read or not just do this or that.
Yeah. But so my what are you reading section is pretty small. How about you?
With all these books about the ocean and stuff, I've finally decided to dive into a book that I have tried and failed to read many times. First time, I believe I was probably 14 years old, which is no surprise I didn't finish it, but it's Moby Dick by Herman Melville. I've never read this book. It has been taunting me on my bookshelf forever. I've decided it is time. To be fair, I am listening to it, and
did the fisherman encourage that thought?
Yeah,
cool.
yeah. And where I end, too, because of the ocean theme with the fishermen and it being all creepy and stuff. I don't know. And also it was just Star Trek First Contact Day. And I think in one of the last couple of podcasts, I did bring up Moby Dick from that. And I want to actually read that quote in its home. So we'll see. It's 24 hours long to listen to. So it's a doozy. But
are you going to watch First Contact after you get to that part in the book?
Of course I am. I might, if I know it's coming, I might even like pause my book, watch that scene, and then like skip ahead in the book and be like, nobody else is allowed to say this line other than Patrick Stewart in my mind. Is that weird?
I mean, yes, but you should do it, and you will do it.
It's also me, yeah. Fair enough. So that's my big one. So that I'm probably going to repeat on this, probably to the end of time. Yeah. But I'm also just picking up Mallrats by Ivy Tholin. I apologize. I don't know how to pronounce her last name. I discovered her at Powell's, which is like, if you don't know what Powell's is, it's our local new and used bookshop. It's actually a staple of Portland. It's pretty well known, but it's huge. This place is
4 stories,
is a maze.
Maybe of books.
It's
maybe 5.
It's
a big ass building with a lot of books.
It's 1, 2, 3, 4, but they're kind of
like half levels. Or
yeah,
something?
yes. So it's technically a 3-story building, but it's on, I think, a bit of a hill. So one side is it's a maze. The rooms are color coded, and that's where like different themes are. But it has a big horror section, which I love. And I found this book there called Tastes Like Candy. And the cover is a skull in cotton candy. And I looked at it and I was really excited because I could tell right off the bat that this was self-published and very, very well done self-published. She did not cut corners. It's not like a pamphlet at all. This looks like it could be published by like Penguin. And it's a slasher. Tastes Like Candy was a slasher, and I absolutely loved it. And so I went on Amazon, which sadly is the only place I could find all of her books, and I bought everything that she's written. And I had since read the sequel to Tastes Like Candy, which was Tastes Like Candy 2, Sugarless. And they were both great. They were like movie slashers. They take place in like a abandoned carnival. And it's a creepy carnival, and it's just, it hits all the points. It's great. Highly recommend. So I'm reading Mallrats, and this one takes place in a mall in Texas. And I'm just going to read you the back of the book so you can get a taste of her style of writing. It's 1999, and there are more people dropping than shopping at the dying Lone Star Mall. While Ginny Todd's parents are off saving the world from Y2K, she is trapped in a small town in Texas, forced to live with her neglectful aunt and uncle and her unstable cousin, Michelle. When Ginny stumbles upon a gruesome murder in an abandoned section of the mall, she finds herself wrapped up in a murder mystery over a year in the making. The worst part? As more bodies pile up and the police follow the most likely suspect, Ginny begins to believe Michelle may be behind it all. Between a freakish killer in a baby doll mascot costume, a potential killer in the bedroom next door, and a mall dripping with blood, Ginny only knows one thing. She needs to get the hell out of Texas.
Nice.
Just love.
That sounds fun.
Yeah. So she recently came out with a new book called Mother Dear, and I had discussed with Dan if we should read that book, and it got away from me this time around, but hopefully next run through we'll read one of her books, because she's self-published, and I'm all about supporting self-published authors, especially when their work is good, and I thought her work was really good. So I think if we can encourage that, that'd be great. So yeah, that's about it. Like I said earlier, I'm playing Oblivion, and that's that.
Okay. Well, let's talk about what's coming up next. It is one of the 2 following books.
It's a coin toss, folks.
Yeah, we will for sure get to this next one, The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones. I'm excited to read that because I haven't read anything by him, and I've only heard good things about his writing. So, and that's one of those books that like the cover is so striking that I looked at it at the bookstore constantly to the point where I forgot if we had bought it or not because I kept looking at it, but we finally got it. I think you might have actually purchased it.
Yes. It's the cover with the deer on it.
Yeah.
I'm sure many of you have seen his books around, but it's that one. He just recently came out with, what was it? I want to say Buffalo Soldier, but I think that's a Bob Marley song.
And Buffalo Bill is a killer, so.
Yeah, he's a great writer. I mentioned before I saw him here in Portland at the Portland Book Festival, and he signed my copy of I Was a Teenage Slasher, because there's a character named Amber in it, and I was very excited.
Yeah, and I also saw the interview, so I kind of feel like I should read something by him because it was a good interview.
Yeah, and he writes like crazy. I think he actually came out with 2 books this year, but the Buffalo Hunter is the one that just came out this year. And I think he actually has something coming out later this year.
Okay. So the other book that might be our next episode is called A Short Stay in Hell by Stephen L. Peck. This is a novella. It's like just over 100 pages. And I had it on hold at the library for, I don't know, the last 4 to 6 months. I mean, it's been a really long time. And it's finally on the way to our library. So since it's a short one and other people are waiting for it, we might end up just reading that and doing that next and then pushing The Only Good Indians to the following episode. So you'll find out which one we talk about. Either one, I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, and you can find out which one we decide on if you follow our Instagram.
Oh, that's right. I guess we should advertise that. You can find us at Dusted On Podcast with periods between the words, all lowercase. You could probably just search Dusk to Dawn Podcast and write it normally and find it.
And I try to be on top of it. I actually didn't do On the Chopping Block for this one because we weren't sure what we were going to do next. So it's just going to go right to streaming Carmilla. But I will post, especially since we're not sure what we're doing next, I will post the On the Chopping Block for sure on our Instagram. But yeah, that's a good place pretty much to see when things are up and streaming, what we're reading next. You're always welcome to throw suggestions at us or tell us how much you love our podcast. If you don't love it, I don't really want to hear it because we're going to do it anyway, and then I'll just be sad. And
yeah,
nobody likes that because then I get weepy and no one wants to hear me. No one wants to hear me weepy.
Yeah, okay. Be nice or fuck off is what she's saying.
Exactly. Yeah, fuck off.
And with that, let's end the episode, yeah?
Yeah, go read some Gothic literature, guys.
It's great.
Oh, actually, there was one other thing I wanted to mention.
Go see Sinners.
Go see Sinners, yes. I was going to say when I was talking about the books I'm reading, I'm not reading this right now, but if you're interested in the study of Orientalism, Edward Said wrote a really, really good essay about it as an academic plug.
Do you know the name of it?
It's called Orientalism.
Oh, okay.
I think it's just that. It might be Orientalism, but it's fabulous. He's a really good literary theorist, I think is what it's called. He's very smart. I think he's still writing, but yeah. Cool. Okay, now I'm actually done. Thanks for listening to me go on and on about Gothic literature. Now I feel like I got my money's worth.
From your own podcast?
My master's degree has all been worth it now.
Great.
Now I can retire.
All right, we'll see you guys next time.
Well, if you've made it this far, then we didn't scare you off. Thanks for listening to Dusk to Dawn, reading horror and weird fiction.
Please rate our podcast, and if you like, follow us on Instagram at Dusk to Dawn Podcast, which is also our Gmail address. Tell us what you liked or didn't like about the show, and let us know if you have any book suggestions. See you next time. Bye.
Bye.